let's start here.
Okay.
Is there any music venue in Ogden right now
So yeah,
that you know of?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
If
Well,
you-
I mean,
if
there's
you're 21,
bars.
yeah.
There's bars. There's,
Well, yeah. Well, there's
Are you
bars and
talking?
there's like
Are you talking
restaurants,
if
right?
if a high school kid wanted to book a show for his band and go and play
Well,
a
or
16,
say
17-year-old kid? Is that what
say
you're
a
saying?
band wanted to come through. It's
Okay.
basically the Ogden Amphitheater. Is that it?
No.
What else
Well,
is it?
all
Where else
ages.
is
That's
there?
it.
Yeah,
If
all
it's all
ages,
ages, that's
yeah.
it.
Shut up. Are you serious?
That's it. That's all right now.
Was there a law passed that'll? I swear, 1999, 2000,
Throwing it back.
you would have high
Prince.
school bands playing bars like Brewskis.
No.
No, or were they
That-
lying?
I don't think you can do
You could-
that.
you
man.
could do that back then.
That- it would happen like so I would be in the situation
No.
where there was a band full of people who were 21, 22, and then one member was maybe 19 and people would kind of look the other way. Like
Right.
that might happen.
Okay.
I
But
know
that
that happens.
never happened.
But
Or there was no rule where you had to stay in a certain area. Nothing
look,
like
it
that.
all depended on if you were a touring band. It all depended on how good your tour manager was.
Yeah.
Really. But
Yeah.
no, I've been into my fair share of bars. Like my wife, she's younger than me, so we would go see shows, and I would have to figure out ways to, because these bands were my friends, I'd have to figure out ways to get her in. I mean, we weren't drinking or anything, but we wanted to see this show, and so she would be a part of the band, carrying equipment for him or something and get him in. So there's ways, but sometimes they don't check as much. If you're bringing a crowd that's going to buy their alcohol,
They don't care.
Yeah.
Or they're
so I
more
think like
willing
what John's
to
saying,
appeal
they
to it.
there tended to be
probably
people
care.
looking
If
the
they
other
don't
way.
have
I don't
to
think
ask
there's
you,
ever been,
then
even
they're-
back then and 20 years ago, I don't think there was.
Yeah, like a band full of high school kids that's getting in there.
But that probably wouldn't happen.
Right, that's
right?
what I mean.
Like
I don't think
that
high
wouldn't
school,
happen.
but there is
But
a
if there was a
3-year
touring band-
stretch between.
But if there was
high
a
school
touring
and
band, for
21.
instance, if there was a touring band that was going to bring some people and they were 20 years old and the only option was to play in a bar, back then I think there probably was a little bit more leniency.
Well, and I feel like they maybe had policies of like, okay, you do have to stay in this area. We're going to bar
Right.
this part off. Nobody back.
Well, because there's
I don't
venues
know.
down in Salt Lake that have you have to get a wristband and you go to a 21 and older
Yeah.
area of the venue. So you've got an all ages. A lot of the shows that I went
Whoa,
to,
right,
we would
right,
go
right.
see all
Back
ages,
in the
but then
day.
upstairs at we
That's
used
where
to go
the
to
bar. That's where the
Bricks.
alcohol was.
Yeah.
Bricks
Saltaire's
was
like
upstairs.
that,
You
yeah.
couldn't go upstairs unless you were 21.
Saltaire.
Yeah.
And like Club Escape,
Saltaire.
Deviate,
like that.
some of
Bricks
these.
was that.
Bricks
Man.
was, yeah. Bricks was that back before.
Bricks.
Back when it was cool and called Bricks before it was
In the venue.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. A prepositional
Guys.
phrase is a perfect name for a
I was so
location.
mad. I had no emotional investment into that decision whatsoever, but I was furious.
Oh, dude,
when they
I was
changed it
mad.
from Bricks to In the Venue. I was
Yeah.
so mad.
I was mad.
Anyway,
So
So-
there's no venues in Ogden
There is-
other than Ogden Amphitheater. And don't they play music at like Brewskis or something?
okay, so there are
Yeah,
venues, and there are some good places.
Kamikazes.
There are some good places to play.
All
There's
right,
Kamikazes.
Kamikazes.
You've got Alleged. You have
The Funk.
Funk
Funk
and
and
Dive is
Dive,
great.
yeah.
Funk and Dive is fantastic. I've gone and seen a number of shows there.
I feel
They're
like
doing great
music's
things
just
there.
Too loud.
It's
way
sure
too
thing,
much
old
too
man.
loud.
Dude, you are
Yeah, you're
so
getting old
right
right
now. If it's too out loud,
And
you're too
even
old.
what's
The
that?
Lighthouse Lounge
Lighthouse,
has
that's what I was
bands
thinking.
every now and then.
Yep.
And then I see like good stuff at Slackwater,
Sure.
and there's
Like
a couple
open mic-
restaurants,
like open mic night stuff, or like, what do you
2-Bit
mean?
Street will
No.
sometimes have somebody
Yeah,
good
2-Bit
there.
Street, right. So,
Like
but
in,
right now it's
Slackwater? Inside Slackwater?
Oh,
or-
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
They'll do like folk. I've been in there and had
Yeah, it's like
a
acoustic
singer
stuff.
songwriter type stuff.
Mm.
And
It's a
so
little loud in there when you're trying to eat.
it
Yeah, I was
You
gonna say,
old
it would
man.
be, I think it would be that.
well, it is though. It,
Like,
it was like
you
I
go
I
there
went-
and
Why
you're
don't you
trying to have
guys just
dinner.
eat your quiet dinner at home? All
Yeah.
right.
I took my wife there one night and we didn't know. We were just like, it's
Right.
Friday night, so we went and we get in there and we're halfway through and we're deep in conversation about some things,
You're
and
screaming.
suddenly this musician starts. And don't get me wrong, great music.
The pizza's
It
great.
just wasn't what I was expecting,
Yeah.
And so it was a little much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so right now, no all age local music venue. There's nothing right now other than the amphitheater. But the problem is most young high school bands can't afford to book that.
Right.
Does that
Right.
make
You're
sense?
doing everything
lot of
yourself
space.
there as far as marketing and
Yes.
booking the space.
and it's not cheap.
Nope.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I've
it's not?
put shows there.
No.
I've put all day festivals there. It is not cheap to rent that
No.
place.
If you're a
So-
nonprofit, they'll give you a discount. But if you're for profit, it's like $500. I think just the base price for the
That's-
space, and then you
That's
have
to
to do
open the doors.
sound.
If you're
and-
sound, you're going to triple that.
Uh-huh.
Double that. It's not. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but we did like a fundraiser there one night, and it was not. I mean, it was
for
not cheap.
all ages, right? We're talking. So how big of a venue are we talking here for like a high school? Let's say there was like a battle of the bands that you wanted to put together,
Okay.
and
Is that still a thing?
you want
It is.
Oh yeah.
It probably only is happening at Weaver State.
Here's
That's maybe,
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
what about? So yeah.
Why
so what
don't,
I'm
we, why,
thinking
don't
is
we,
like,
why don't we maybe step back a few years and talk about kind of the history?
yeah, because there
of where
used to
it's
be
been.
things here.
There used to be a lot of great
okay,
things
yeah,
here.
yeah.
So
that's what I
so
wanna
it
hear.
all so when I was in high school, I graduated high school in 1999. I went to Bonneville High School. Go Lakers.
Boo.
But
Boo.
easy. I'm your guest. Okay, the guest is always right. So
Still a Royal.
Roy, the armpit of the Ogden area.
Oh,
Anyways,
man.
Ouch. The terrace. Yeah, let's talk about the
This-
terrace.
all
Anyway.
right.
So,
Wow.
so boy, this is. I shouldn't have invited him to
I've lived
sit
in
next
both
to me on the
places.
couch.
Right.
You lived in
Kidding.
both places. Yeah.
So I
yeah.
remember when I was a sophomore in high school. This girl that I was a student government officer with. She goes, "Hey, a bunch of us are going to go check out my brother's band." Okay, so this would have been in like 96, 97. We're going to go check out my brother's band. Why don't you come? And I thought, all right. I've always enjoyed music. I was into it. I remember as a young kid, me and my buddy would put on concerts in the backyard playing tennis rackets and lip syncing the Beach Boys songs. Like that
Yeah.
was like we were like I always dreamed of being in front of a crowd and playing in a band and writing music and creating something and sharing it. Right. And so I thought, well, this is great. I've never been to like a local band's concert. So we went and watched these guys play. And they were all three guys were former Bonneville graduates. It was her older brother and a couple of their friends. And I went and we went to a little place called The Junction.
Oh yeah.
Okay, do you remember? 23rd
Junction.
Street in Jackson. It was an old church in the middle of a residential neighborhood. It was literally the worst place for a music venue, but it was magical to me.
It was great.
It
Well, and
was
it felt like you
magical.
had no supervision. That's
Right.
what was great about the neighborhood.
And it was right. And it was the thing is it was run by a very close friend of mine named Ted Shoup. He did a great job. And what he did was he kind of opened up the doors for some of us that were aspiring musicians to have a place to showcase our act and kind of cut our teeth a little bit
Yeah.
before moving up to the next level. And I always remember
Minor
that.
league stuff.
And I
Yeah.
loved going to the Junction. I spent a lot of weekends there watching bands. I didn't care who was playing. I couldn't get enough watching bands.
Did you
and
pay
so
to get in?
you paid to get in.
yeah, it was like
So
$5.
yeah, it was like $5 to get in, and what he would do is he would take a tally on who you were there to see.
Uh-huh.
Right, he had a system, and if you brought in enough people and he covered his cost, then he would split the money based on who brought in how many people. And so I remember when I was a sophomore, and I thought I got to learn to play guitar. So I got a guitar. I had played piano since I was like in first grade, and so I got a guitar and I taught myself to play sophomore year. And then I thought, this is something I need to do. I've got to do this. So by the time I was like a senior, I started a band. I was playing keyboards and singing in it. We were kind of like a Ben Folds 5 kind of thing, we're playing. And I started this band, and then I joined another band and another band. And I remember I joined this band with a couple of guys that I went to school with. I was a senior, one was a junior, and one was a sophomore. And we were called Olfactory.
Oh
And
yeah.
do you remember
I
that?
remember.
And we went and played our first show. We were like basically a Matchbox 20 knockoff band. We went and
Man,
played.
You guys sound so lame.
Come on.
Well, I feel like you're
Bro.
downplaying the Counting Crows, which
You
was
have
Right.
no
that was the
idea.
aspect I
That
remember.
was it. Okay, it was more like it was Matchbox 20 plus Counting Crows equals as bad as you would expect it to be. And so we
Great
go
at the
in.
time. Be
Again,
fair, it
no,
was.
to be
that
fair,
was
it was
amazing.
good. It was the real deal.
Yeah, we
Like,
I
had,
love Rob Thomas. I got to say it on there. I gotta.
I love
I'm
Rob
not
Thomas.
gonna- I'm not gonna fault you, man.
Do you have any record? I would love to listen if you sound like Rob Thomas.
That's
Yeah,
You all of
buddy.
a sudden got a lot better looking to me.
Hey-o.
Yeah.
I could find you an old recording of us. And
Guess
you'll-
good thing I
think-
am sitting next to you on the couch, huh, Jason?
So-
gotta keep it
God,
separated.
keep it- that was-
Where your hands
I'm
at,
blushing
Shane?
now. I'm blushing.
Shane's over here fangirling.
So we start playing at the Junction, and I ended up when I left that band, I started doing kind of a singer-songwriter thing, and it was more like a I would tell jokes and stories, and I would play songs, and it was kind of a whole act. And we would go and play at the Junction, and I remember that was like in '99 when I graduated, and then I served in LDS mission. When I got home, I started another band, and we played there a lot. And I still remember in like 2002, 2003, when Ted shut down the Junction.
Oh yeah.
He shut it down, and he told me, and I talked to him about it. I was like, Ted, why are you leaving? He's like, well, this space, it's in a residential neighborhood. I'm getting a lot of complaints because, unfortunately, the kids that were coming, they didn't like. I revered it. Like, it was in an old church, but to me, it was religion.
Oh yeah.
Right? Local music and the music scene and going to these shows, it was like attending church for me. Right. And so, as a high school kid that was going through a lot and was very angsty and was trying to figure out all my emotions and how to express myself, and battling all these raging hormones and these ideas, and how can I balance all this? For me, that was what got me through. Right. This local music venue that I could go to, and I could feel at home, and I could feel safe, and I could feel like everything was going to be okay. It shaped me. And I still hold a very special place in my heart for the Junction and for Ted and what he gave to us. And unfortunately, kids are kids, and they do stupid stuff, and they were ruining it for the rest of us who really revered the place. They didn't respect it as much, and so they were going and doorbell ditching and throwing beer bottles in people's yard, and so the city basically had to say, you got to clean this up, and with enough complaints, he said, I'm going to go find a place down in Salt Lake. And so he moved his venue down to Salt Lake. And I remember the conversation that I had with Ted. I've never forgotten it, and I never will forget it. And because I think he was dead wrong. And I set out at that moment to prove him wrong. He told me, he said, Jason, a venue in Ogden will never work. And I said, why? And his reason was, he said Salt Lake is 35 miles from Ogden, but Ogden is 350 miles from Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Oh shit!
Yeah. So I said,
oh shit!
And that stuck with me. I mean, I was like 22 years old at the time, 23 years old, and he told me that, and I was like, "You're wrong." He said, "Then prove me wrong," and I was like, "I will. Give me time. I will." So flash forward a few years. Right after that, 2005, a guy named Ron Atencio, great friend of mine, opens up an all-ages venue called Mojo's.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hung out.
So
And
Ron opens
Junction
Mojo's.
closes in
Junction closes
2003,
probably 0203.
and then 05 is.
And so there's a
that's
gap.
why I
So there's a
don't hear about
lull,
this place.
right? So there's a lull again, where there's no local music. So Ron
Right.
opens up Mojo's in 2005. Okay,
22nd in Washington.
22nd in
Right.
Washington, great, cool space, local
Building's
art.
still there.
Building's still there.
Was it Trump
Wait,
campaign
26
headquarters?
22nd in Washington.
Yeah, that's
It was like 2210 Washington Boulevard.
Where am I? At?
You know where the Even Stevens
Right
is?
next to
It's
Even
right
Stevens.
next
Oh,
door.
okay.
Right next door to
okay.
that.
Yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
had that. He ran a little magazine out of there called Street Magazine. He had like a clothing
Oh,
store that he was selling
yeah.
stuff out.
I do remember that.
Ron's
place.
a great guy. Was heavily involved in like the Ogden City Planning Commission.
Yep.
So he opens his
Tried to
venue.
run for the state house in
Yeah.
maybe 06.
Yeah, he
Nope,
did.
it was
08?
in 2010. Trust me,
It could have been. You're probably right.
it comes up in the story.
Okay.
So I know exactly when it was
All right.
because, and I'll get to why I know exactly what it was, because that was a very emotional time in my life when that happened. So anyway, so Ron opens this venue, and there's very few bands, very few local bands, because you haven't had a place to play
Right,
for 2 or
right.
3 years.
Everybody's gone, right?
So everybody's gone, and it's died off. So Ron comes back. It's on life support, and he brings it back to life, right? So he starts booking these bands, and at first Ron had the benefit of having a really cool space where he made people feel at home, and these people were Ron's family, and that's what I loved about Ron. These people were his family, and he loved them like children, like his own children, right? And he would do anything for these people, and I loved that about Ron. It was amazing. And so he had this really cool space with very manageable rent.
Yep.
And a lease that was very, like, when I say very manageable, it was like a fifth of what I was paying when I opened my venue. Like,
Yeah.
it was amazing. And so
And the
so
city
he
helped
didn't-
him get it.
Right. And so he didn't have to book huge shows to keep the doors open, right? He could book bands that would bring in 10, 15 people. So he could have a show on a Friday night and bring in 30 people and at $5 a head and do that every weekend. 30 people was his break even. He could, or 20 people was his break even. He had a great gig going, and it worked out really well for him.
10 years.
And it went from 05 to 2015. And
Huh.
so Ron really, really breathed some life back into the local music scene.
Yeah.
And I remember going to shows at Mojo's and watching these bands, because I had friends that were in bands that would invite me, and I would come down and watch it. And the engineer in me was always saying, I can build a better mousetrap. right? That was my idea. It was
A
I
better,
like
a
Is
better
venue-
what? A
a
better
better
what?
mousetrap. That's
That's
the business phrase and the business idea is
Shut up,
is-
Shane.
you
I
don't
didn't know
have
what
to
he was
come up with-
talking about.
The
His
idea-
eyes are like, what the hell
the
is he
the
talking
idea in
about?
business is you don't have to do something new and exciting. You just have to build a better mousetrap,
Okay.
right? And,
Okay.
and so I would go into there and I
get
would
you now.
I would look and I would see and I would
Fuck you,
say, I
Shane.
could do this. I could do this. I think I could open a venue. So I at the time I had been working with local bands, promoting shows. I had a recording studio in my basement. I had, I had a chintzy little record label that we had released a couple of albums. It was mostly like self-release stuff that we were trying to get out with me and my buddies. So I'd record and I'd do that. And I just absolutely loved music, could never walk away. And in 2009, I finally pulled the trigger and I opened my own venue. Right. So I had done some research to find out kind of what the state of the music scene was. And I thought I could make it work. And so I put a buddy of mine and I, he was kind of a minor owner, but we started this company, this business called The Basement. Okay, so I found someone that owned the Berthana building. Do you know down on 24th Street, the
Yep.
Berthana? It's the one with the cowboy.
It's
painted on the
where
wall.
Warren's is now, right?
What, it-
no, it's
no,
it's
it's
Union Grill now.
Union
but
Grill
Oh,
now.
oh yeah, yeah.
Craft Burger
right,
was
sorry.
there.
If you know
Sorry.
where you know where the frozen
yeah.
yogurt shop is,
Yeah, man.
that was my spot. It's so weird to see it not have black walls and sound equipment
Uh-huh.
like a stage, and to see like these bright colors there. And
It's a good spot for a venue,
really weird.
man.
It was fantastic. So I find this guy that owns the building, and I say, hey, I've got this idea, and I've been looking at buildings, and no one wants to take a risk on me. And this guy flies in from California, and he meets with me, and I show him my business plan, and I show because I'm an engineer, so I'm obviously putting in a lot of time and effort into this and thinking about it. And at the time, I'm teaching high school math. I had just lost my job, and so I decided to be a teacher. Right. And so I had some money saved up for my severance when they did away with my position at the county. So I had some money that I could invest into a sound system and a stage and a space. And so I had this money that I'm like, it's time. Right. And so I said, I'm going to do this. So I get this guy. It's like fall. He flies in. It's like late summer, early fall. And he flies in. He's like, hey, I can, show me what you're going to do. So we go to Mojo's happens to have a battle of the bands that night. Right. So I go, so it would have been like early summer. So I go in and I'm like, hey, come and watch. And he shows up. Okay. And we go in there and we're watching and I'm telling him, this is what I do different. This is it. And he's like, oh, okay. And I show him the bands that are playing. He's like, these are cool bands. I think we got this. And I'm like, all right, cool, man. I think we got it. So this guy that used to run security for me I used to do concerts in this, I probably shouldn't admit this, but there was a building that I worked in. And I was like, hey, I want to do a concert in the garage. And the owner's like, cool, but there's the basement that's not being used right now. So why don't you just use that, see if you can use that for your concert? And I was like, cool. So I go to the owner of the building and I'm like, hey, man, can we use this like for a show? And he's like, sure, man. So in between
Obviously
that
not
time,
a lawyer.
in between that time from like 2003 to like 2005, when there were no venues, I was doing shows in a place we just called the basement. Now, we would never print the address because if anybody found out, because what I had done is I took the keys and I made a copy.
Yeah.
Dude, we were throwing illegal concerts in this basement of this building, and the only way you got in is if you knew where it was. We didn't advertise. We
a
would
real
just say,
speakeasy,
just
dude.
say, come
Yeah,
and check
for
these
real, right?
bands out. At the sound system was terrible. It was just a garbage, like this open room. The reverb, the
one door
reverb was
in,
terrible.
fire trap.
Yeah, dude, it was like, oh my gosh, we would have been in so much trouble if something happened. But it was so exciting, and kids loved it. And so at first, you'd play in front of 30, 40 people, and then it was 50, and then it was 100. And so it took off. So I actually paid for my sophomore year of college by throwing these illegal concerts
Nice.
in what we called the basement. So when I was like, I'm going to open my own venue, of course it was going to be called the basement, right? A throwback to all those kids from 03 to 05 who would come to these shows. And, I'm charging $5 at the door, and we get 120 kids show up, so I'm making like $600-700 a night. And, back then tuition was only like, $1,200. So, I'd throw a couple of these a semester and I'd pay my tuition. So we get in and we're doing all this,
But then to every outsider who just was going to the basement that's on ground level on 24th Street,
yeah,
they're like, where's the basement? Oh, yeah, I've been to that place. That's called the basement?
yeah,
That's not a
yeah,
basement.
it was the basement more more kind of spoke
It was
to
like
the
the
idea,
attitude
the
of the
attitude of it.
place.
Like
Yeah.
like you were. What I wanted it to feel like when I opened it was I wanted it to feel like you were having a show at your friend's basement. You were just hanging out with some friends. We had some couches there to start with.
Right.
After a while, we got rid of those. But when we opened, we had just couches where you could sit and hang out and just watch a show. The cool thing about the space was there were steps. There was a little upstairs area, a little viewing area.
Oh,
There was a
yeah.
backstage, and there were steps on the side of the wall. So it actually looked like you were in a basement, like you were, these steps coming down the stairs. The bands would go hang out up there, and then they'd walk down those stairs right onto the stage, and they'd set up and play. And it was really cool. So back to Mojo's with this this Battle of the Bands. We're sitting there, and this kid comes up that used to run security for me at the basement at the old speakeasy, And so this kid walks up, and he's like, "Bro, it's been like 3 years. What's up, man? I haven't seen you." And I'm like, "Hey, what's up, man?" And he's like, "Dude, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just here checking it out." And the guy next to me, the guy who owns the building that I'm looking to lease, is like, "He's scouting out here, man. He's gonna open a new venue."
Hey, dude.
"Bro, that's awesome. You're gonna open a venue. That's so cool, man. You should talk to Ron." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, that's
let's
probably
not
not
tell
a
Ron."
great idea. I probably should." He's like, "No, dude, you should totally talk to Ron." And I'm like, probably not, man. Let's like not do that." And he's like, "Okay, whatever." So I'm sitting there enjoying the show, and 5 minutes later, here's this kid walking up with
He's like,
Ron.
"I found
With the
Ron."
Ron.
And he's like,
Father, yeah.
"It's him right there." And Ron looks at me, and I look at him, and I'm like, "Oh gosh."
Did you know him
Here we
then?
go. No,
No. Yeah.
no, I didn't know him.
Yeah.
And so he walks out, and he's like, "Let's go outside." And I was like, "Oh, man." It's like getting
You're
called
gonna
to the
fight
principal's
for
office.
turf.
Like, here's this guy that has single-handedly revived the scene, and I'm looking at it as like we can build this together, right?
Right. It's
So
a
I
rising
start-
tide.
Yeah. So I start talking to him, and I'm telling him my ideas, and he's just like, "Cool. Well, all right, man. Well, have a good one. Good luck to you." And he starts telling me all the reasons why I'm not going to succeed. He's like, and I don't blame him, man. He was trying
Sure.
to protect his family, and that's what people like. He and I had a I don't want to call it a feud, but we sure didn't like each other at first. We really didn't. So this is 09.
It was a feud.
We did not like each other. Okay?
Yeah, rivalry.
It was bad.
beef. Yes.
and I don't blame
SB
him.
Nation beef.
Because-
We're gonna do a
because
beef
the-
story
I-
on this.
After I started having kids, and I'm now at a point where I have children, I see why he treated me the way he did, and I don't blame him for it. And
That's me
I
and the
don't
dark
wanna-
side guy.
so yeah, you and the dark
I
side
don't
guy.
fuck around with that guy. These cool guys.
Laser tags worked out.
So we're like, so we, it is what it is. I understand he was trying to protect his family. It
Yeah.
wasn't his business, and that's what people. Local music to him was his family. For me, it was a business, right? It was for me, it was a business, and it was a way that I could return the favor that Ted did to me. That I could, and that's what Ron was doing as well. But I wanted to give back. I wanted to provide them with a really cool place, and but with Ron, it was more than that, right? It was a family. At the end of the day, it hurt to walk away from the basement, but it like almost emotionally destroyed Ron to close the doors of Mojo's.
Yeah, it was really hard.
It was different.
I
It
was
was
part
it
of
was
that.
different
So
between
why
me
did
and
it
him.
close?
Mojo's or the basement?
Both.
Mojo's.
They raised the
And
rent.
the
Well,
Raised
wait.
the
So
rent on him.
which closed first?
Basement.
Basement.
Yeah.
Basement did. So in 2009, I opened in the fall. It's like October 2009. We have our first show there. We have this big grand opening. I book like 8 bands. We get like 300 people come through the doors that night. I open it up. It's free. People come in and check this out. I spared no expense on the sound system. Because that was always kind of an issue with Mojo's, if I'm being perfectly honest. It was a great space. It had a lot going for it. The stage was amazing. The problem was the sound.
Well, and I mean, it was small. It
And
wasn't
it was small.
that great. a
So the
space.
basement was about 3 times as big as Mojo's,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Space wise. And so I wanted to have I said, look, and that was one of the things I told the guy that owned the building. I said, we're going to have a quality sound, right? The bands are going to come in here and they're going to feel like they're playing Madison Square Garden because we've got good sound. We've got, Ron at the time didn't have any monitors, so you couldn't hear yourself playing back.
It's tough.
And so we had 3 monitors up in the front, 1 in the drums. We had 4 monitors total. We had like good double stack speakers. We had, we wanted it to sound good. And I had the highest quality microphones because if a band came in there, my feeling was that people were like, look, who's your clientele? And the way I ran my business was that the people paying $5 to come and see a show were not my clients. My clients were the bands.
Mhm.
And if I could keep the bands coming back, they would bring their fans, right?
Right.
So I was all about client management. So I had this system where I would write down, I would assign someone, one of my staff, to every band, and they would go around and follow them around and ask them questions and fangirl out really hard about them. And at the end of the night, they would present to me information about every single band, stuff they gathered. Right. So 2 months later, when this band comes in, I'm asking them, "Hey man, how's Michelle doing? Your girlfriend?" "Oh shoot, you guys broke up. I'm sorry to hear that, man." But it was like little things like, "Oh man, I remember last time we were talking about."
There was this girl that was asking about me, and we ended up hooking up. So,
So we, there was all this stuff like I would take all that information, and then they would be like, "Oh my gosh, this guy who owns this venue like knows all this personal stuff about me." Like we were all about making them feel like rock stars. I figured out what they loved, what food they liked, and I would have some of that down waiting for them. They would come in, and these bands would be like, "Oh my gosh!" So they would work twice as hard to fill the room, and I would go out and do marketing and promotions and try to get big shows there. So when we started, we were averaging kind of the same as Mojo's, right? We were averaging 40, 50 people on a weekend. Okay,
This is an 09.
this is 09, right? And that was not good for me, okay, because my break even was like 100 a night. Okay, if I was
Right.
doing shows on Friday and Saturday, so 50 wasn't cutting it, and I'm starting to stress, right? And that's when I'm, like I said earlier, when you're backed up into a corner and backed up against a wall, you that's when innovation really comes out. And so I remember it was like January, and I'm like stressing out, right? And something, I don't know what happened, but I started thinking about I was thinking to myself about what do I really love? I was thinking my birthday's coming up, and I'm thinking, man, you know what? Like I'm so excited for March. If I can just make it through January and February, it's lean. I'm losing money in this business. If I can just make it to March, everything's going to be okay. And I started thinking, my birthday's in March, March Madness. I love watching. I was watching a lot of college basketball back then. So I thought if I can just make it there, and then it hit me. I was like, you know what? A battle of the bands, March Madness style, a tournament bracket style of 27 bands, 3 a night facing off. And then the winner of that 3 moves on to the next round. And then the winner of that moves on to the next round. And we set up a bracket, and we do this battle of the bands. But what we do is we require the bands to sell tickets. And part of your score depends on how many tickets you sell. And it just hit me and I was like, this is brilliant. This is a genius idea. And so I go in and I tell my guys, I'm like, hey, I got this idea. They're like, that's great. So I start advertising for this, call it Tournament of Champions, right? This Tournament of Champions. We say, we're going to do this amazing big thing, right? We're going to do something huge. Now, all the while, Ron and I still hate each other. Right? We still
He's still like,
we would book bands, and they'd be like, hey man, we're playing a show next week at Mojo's. You should come check us out. And we would go and we would pay money, and I would take my staff with, and we would watch shows. And Ron never asked me not to come, but the message was sent pretty clear to me that we weren't welcome there, right? Like he had his security guard come and tell me you're not welcome here. Like Ron was always like whatever, but his security guard is like, you got to go. And I'm like, look, man, I just want to support my friends. Like I'm paid my money. He's like, I'll give you your money back. I said, it's not about the money. I want us to be friends, right? So anyway, so this is now 2010. I come up with this Tournament of Champions idea. I start advertising like crazy. I get all these bands excited about it. We're starting to get bands that can bring kids in. And so when I start telling them part of your score is ticket sales, right? Part of it's like I'm going to have judges from other bands, and whoever wins. So we start setting this up. We set it up the first week of March. So the first weekend we've got, we did 27 bands. So you got to go 9 nights. So now I'm sitting there going, all right, 9 nights times 3 bands a night. So it took us 4 weeks, the whole month of March to get through the first round. And all of a sudden, bands, we're teaching them how to market themselves. We're teaching them how to promote. We're teaching them how to get in with people and sell tickets. So we're doing all these innovative things and helping these bands. We start this thing where once a month we would have a class, right? For any bands, it was a free class that you could come in and learn things. So if you wanted to learn about social media marketing, we had a guy who would come in and talk to bands about how to market your band on social media. You wanted to learn how to sell tickets better. We offered a free class. You'd come in and we would teach you how to go out and sell tickets. You wanted to learn how to write music. We had, so we had these
Content
people.
marketing. Exactly what you did.
So we would get in there, and every month we would have these things. And so kids started doing more and more. So now all of a sudden the shows went from having 50 people to having 100 people to having 120 people, right? And it just starts picking up. And all of a sudden now we get to this tipping point, this critical mass where people are in the room and they look around. And before, when there's 30 people in a room that can fit 200, they're going, yeah, it's all right.
Right.
But now all of a sudden you have 150 people in a room that could fit 200, and they go, this is where we have to be every weekend.
Yeah.
This is the happening place. We print out this poster up on the wall. We write all the band names on. We've got the bracket thing going. It's just working amazing, right? So we get all the way down. Okay, so the first round we narrow it down from 27 down to 9, and then we have those 9 go in April, and then in May I plan this big event, right? And I start advertising it, and I invite everybody I know to come to what's called the Local Music Summit. Okay, I say we're having a summit, we're having a presentation, we're going to do something called the Local Music Summit. And I said, we've got to get everybody on board here. I have someone who's very close to me and very close to Ron. Go and invite Ron over to my venue. We're having it on a Thursday night, and the grand finale of the Tournament of Champions is Saturday night. So I say on Thursday night we're going to do this Local Music Summit. And at that point, behind the scenes, I had been working on a website. Okay. And I had printed up stickers, and I had printed up all this stuff for this website. Okay, so we get there, and I unveil at this Local Music Summit. It was May 15th, 2010. Okay, and I know this because it was around the time that Ron was running for office, and I went and donated money to his campaign to try to buy him off to get him to come to my venue. Because I said, look, I hear you're running. I went over to his venue and I said, look, I know we've had issues in the past, but I think you would be good at the state house, and I want to support you and endorse you. Here's $100 for your campaign. You know, what can I do to help you? So I actually went and made some phone calls and tried to get people excited about electing Ron to the state house. So that, all of a sudden, we were like, okay, maybe there's more to this than that. We have this Local Music Summit. I unveil this website, and I start telling people, look, as a local music scene, we need to work together. We've had Mojos, and now we have the basement. We have 2 venues. There's enough to go around. And really what was happening is shows at Mojo started going from 15, 20 people a weekend to 30 to 40 a weekend, 40 to 50, right? So all of a sudden, just having another venue that's pushing bands to promote themselves and market more, and not saying, look, you want to play at my venue, that's fine. You got to bring 25 people. You want to headlight at a venue, you got to bring 80. You know, and all of a sudden it becomes a badge of honor to be that top billed band in a local show. So we just created a hierarchy and a pecking order for these bands. There were bands that would headline every show because they would just bring in bodies, and there were other bands that wouldn't, and they would stay in that opening spot. And they're like, what can we do? We'll come to this class next Wednesday night. We're going to talk about how you can take it to the next level. Meanwhile, there's a metal band that comes out called Fire in the Skies. Right? These guys come to my place. And they were like, look, we've got an idea, right? They really helped put the basement on the map with the metal scene, because we would schedule on Saturdays. We would start music at 2:00 and we would end at 11, and we would charge like $10, and you could come in and stay all day. We started selling, 300 tickets to this thing, 400 tickets. And the more tickets you sold to this show, the later in the night you got to play. Fire in the Skies would headline. One of the greatest metal bands, southern metal bands I ever heard, called Bro out of Salt Lake, BREAUX. Go check them out. They are sick. They would always play second to last. So those two would headline. If you sold a lot of tickets, you were playing right before them. So you're playing right before the headliner. We start selling 200, 300, 400. One night we do like 500 tickets to this show, right? Our space can hold maybe 250. Like, we've got like 300-400 people in this one room, and these shows were electric. All of a sudden people are starting to get this buzz and this, oh my gosh, it's going. So this is about March, April, right? By May, all of a sudden we're averaging about 150 people at a show, and now I'm making a profit. Things are going well. And it just took off from there. So this Local Music Summit, back to that, I'm sitting there and I unveil this website, and it was called the Ogden Local Music Awareness Coalition. Okay, and I enlisted everybody on. It was the Ogden LMAC, Ogden Local Music Awareness Coalition. I enlisted everybody there to be a member, and what I had done was I set up a website this was kind of before. This was before Facebook was really a big thing. But what it was it was a bulletin board. The background was just like a pole on a street, and it just was like a cork board on there. Oh. And you would post. There was a place where you could post your band, right, and the show that's coming up. And it didn't matter what venue it was at, whether it was at a bar, at an all ages venue, no matter where it was. And you could post it, and it would come up. Is it still live?
Looks that way.
No, it's not.
So, still lives.
Is it still on there?
Let me see if it...
Oh my gosh.
What'd you say it was?
OgdenLMAC.org.
No events. Come on, Jason. What the freak?
Okay, all right. So here's the thing.
Oh my gosh, supporting local music.
So we started
You had a
this,
mission
members.
statement, bro?
dude.
It's legit.
I'm telling you right now, my goal was to take the Ogden local music
We
scene to
are
the next level.
localmusic.com.
Okay, go to wearelocalmusic.com, see if that's still live. Because wearelocalmusic.com is where we would post shows, right? And so what we were doing is we were promoting music at every venue. And it was ground zero was the basement, right? And so the basement, we were trying to get people to go to shows because we knew that if people would go to shows, everybody succeeded. As John said, rising tide floats all boats. That was our motto, and that was our idea.
I'm not gonna click on that link.
Yeah, I would probably go easy because I have not looked at any of this stuff for years. So anyway, so people start posting to this. People start taking an active interest. They're going out and promoting. I start booking some touring bands. What I would do with touring bands, this was back when CDs was cool. So we were looking for ways that we could be innovative and unique. If someone had never heard of a touring band, we would take their top 2 or 3 songs, we would burn them to a disc. We would then put a sticker on the back saying, this is the band, this is when they're playing at the basement. We would stamp the disc with a stamp with that band's name on it. We would go hand out hundreds of these at the mall. We'd go hand them out at like Hot Topic, at these different stores, and we would just go hand them out to kids, say, you should come to the basement, check it out. This show's only, $5, $8, whatever. So we had this massive guerrilla marketing campaign. By the time 2011 rolls around, right? So we do the Tournament of Champions again in 2011. We are averaging 250 people at a show. Averaging.
Amazing.
250 people at a show. All because of what kicked off with the Ogden LMAC, the We Are Local Music. We are Ogden. What was it? WeAreLocalMusic.com or something like that.
Yeah.
And we have all of these things, and people are going crazy.
Well, and not
right?
just that, but I mean, it's that investment that you put back in the bands. It's those
Sure.
seminars you're doing and
Well,
stuff.
and what we also said was like, so then it started falling apart. And the reason it started falling apart was because my motto, and it may have been flawed. I mean, I was young. I was in my late 20s. I didn't know what was, my philosophy was I'm going to be better with a band's money than the band. If I paid a band $40 to come and play a show, right, that band would go and spend 30 of it at Beto's on the drive home. Okay. They were not good with their money. So my philosophy was, if you come and bring a lot of kids to my show and we make some money, I will pay for stickers for you, right? I'll buy you stickers. I've got a connection with a print shop. I'll buy you some merch. I'll buy you some stickers, some shirts, whatever. And so I would work with these bands and I would do, these things with them and try to help them. And they, that was my flaw. I didn't pay bands to come and play, right? Unless they were like a touring band and I worked out a deal. Because we started booking some pretty big touring bands and getting bands to come in. They're mostly metal. Like Provo was the spot for like indie music.
Yeah,
Ogden was
Velour, dude. Yeah.
Ogden was where it was at for metal. So I started getting these big booking agents calling me and being like, "Hey, we're hearing good things." And I would always pay a band what I promised to pay them, no matter if we made money or lost money. And that's why booking agents wanted to work with me. And I knew at the end the books would balance out. If I lost $300 this night, I might make $1,000 next week. So it's all going to balance out. So I started booking these bands and bringing in big touring bands. We started getting a reputation, and then Ogden starts getting a reputation. I get a booking agent from or a promoter from Salt Lake want to come down and use my venue, and I'd heard bad things about this promoter, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to work with you because I've got, I'm going to protect my investment. So he gets pissed. He goes to Mojo, starts putting shows at Mojo's. And he starts poaching my artists, trying to get them to come and open for his shows. And he says, look, I'll let you open for this amazing band, but you got to sign something that says you won't play a show 30 days before. So now all of a sudden they won't play my venue anymore. So things start falling apart, right? This promoter starts, because I pissed him off, he starts kind of pulling away. My rent is about to go up, and I'm not gonna move. I'm not gonna stay here. So I go and move to a different location. We're down for 3 months, and it hurt us.
Yeah.
Right. Like it hurt us. And so in summer of 2012, or the fall of 2012, we moved to a new place in 2011. We had some really amazing shows there. It opened the door for bigger shows, but it was never the same. Yeah. It wasn't downtown. It was down on Wall Avenue. It was like on 31st and Wall, and it just never felt the same. And we never could get that vibe back. I in desperation, I opened up to another promoter, let him come in. He screwed me over. I mean, I was making some bad decisions, trying to chase the money that I was making in 2011, and I just started hemorrhaging money. And I thought, well, maybe if I put more money in, I'll get it back out. So I started dumping more money in, right? Meanwhile, I just had my third kid. There's a lot going on, and I am super stressed. And I remember in July I one day in like late July, I'm driving home and I just broke down. I was like, I can't do this anymore. It's done. Like, this is something that I put my heart and soul into, building this scene, building this venue, and all of a sudden, kids that I was helping get their start, they now hate me because they're like, well, people are telling them, well, you should be getting paid, and they start calling me greedy. And so now these kids that I put so much effort into, right, they're saying, oh, he's a bad guy because he's taken all of our money, and they don't understand. They don't understand the money that it takes to do this. They don't understand that I literally lost 15 grand. I walked out of there. I lost $15,000 at the end there, right? Like, they don't understand that. They don't understand the lease that I was paying, $3,000 a month in a lease, and I had to break my lease early, so I got to pay a penalty, right? They don't understand all the stuff that I'm going through and what it costs to do that. And they're squabbling over $100 a night. And I'm like, look, man, I'm trying to keep the doors open, and they're now turning other bands against me. This promoter now starts threatening me. I'm getting threats against me, and it just all kind of at the same time in 2012. I was just like, I'm done. I got to do it. And I remember going over to Ron, and at this point, we had become good friends. Okay, over time, because we started big, and I went over to Ron. I said, I need to talk to you, and I remember telling Ron, I think I'm done. I think I'm out. I've lost all this money. I can't keep chasing it. I got to be done. And we talked for like 3 hours that night, and I was just super down, and like I was crying. I was like, because this is my child that I'm losing, something that I put so much effort into, and he was there for me, and he helped me, and he's like, look, why don't you do a show a month at my place? Just stay in it and have it. And so he was gracious enough to do that. And what I did was I said, look, I want to upgrade your sound system, Ron. So I gave him some of my sound system in exchange so I like sold it off for parts, gutted it, but I gave him some of my best sound equipment in exchange for the next couple of years. Let me stay in the scene and book shows here. And so he let me do that for a couple of years, and I would book these. So he'd, have his shows that were doing 40 or 50 kids, and then I'd do mine. We'd bring in 150, 200 kids, and he'd say, you can keep all the money that night to try to make back some of that money that you lost, and, in exchange for selling me the sound system. And so it ended really, it was bittersweet. It was good to get some time back to myself, and it was a lot of stress. It was a lot of work, and I put a lot into it. And it was the equivalent of working 2 full-time jobs, and I loved every minute of it, but I mean, it hurt to walk away from it, but it was also kind of nice. So in 2014, I stopped doing shows there. Ron then tells me, hey, they're jacking up my rent, and he closed the doors in 2015. And he called me and said, I need to talk to you. And I went over there, and we talked for about 3 hours, and he said, this is what's happening. And we cried together because we had great memories together, and he was a great friend of mine. And it was amazing that we went from being bitter enemies and this hatred, and now we're like so close that when he shuts it down, I'm the first one he calls because he knows I've been there. Obviously, it was open for 3 years. Don't get me wrong. Ron's was 10 years. He had a lot more emotionally invested in that than I did, and so it was really hard. For me, it was hard. For him, it broke him. You know what I mean? Like, it was bad, and he had to leave. I mean, he left Ogden for a while.
Yeah, he went to Vegas.
He had to leave because it was just so hard. It was so hard for him. And unfortunately, that crushed the scene. I mean, that closing, Mojo's closing, the basement took it from, we had great shows, big shows, amazing shows. And then it started slipping again when there was only one venue. When there was 2, it was really pushing it forward.
Yeah, because Ron was limited. I mean, after a while,
Ron was absolutely
fire
limited.
came in and
So-
said, you can only fit 120 people.
It was
in."
my show that I booked there and put there after I closed.
Yeah.
That the fire department came and shut it down. And we had a touring band there that actually went out and played an acoustic show in the back alley for all the fans. Dude,
Back alley's
That's
cool.
cool.
it was amazing, but it was the most stressful time. Like, I
Oh,
still
yeah.
had to pay a penalty because it wasn't up to, like, it was bad, but it was my show that happened because some other guy tried to open an all-ages venue and didn't know what he was doing. And he, like, his idea was, instead of my approach of a rising tide floats all boats, this guy was like, if I can get Mojo shut down, then I'll be the only game in town.
Oh, man.
So this turd burglar freaking goes out and starts calling the cops on us and the fire department. And so during a show, when we sold like 200 tickets, they come in and we're like, you got to shut it down. They shut the show down. We're like, nah. So,
Well, and that's so, because I knew bands at that time when you sort of changed that incentive structure.
Yeah.
And I remember them talking about, like, I can go here and, well, I can go to Mojo's and get paid money, or else I can go to the basement and get kind of paid in merch or whatever. And they did kind of feel like they were getting ripped off. And it was almost that competition between you guys that helped kill it in a way. You know what I mean? It was like having Ron's structure is what made people not trust your structure. You know what I mean?
Well, yes, to a degree, but I also think that having, like, kids would come to my venue, they'd play in front of 200 people, right? And then they'd go to Ron's, they'd play in front of 30. And they'd be like, maybe the basement's not so bad. But I really was. I mean, I was vilified, and I understood that. Like, I understand the first person through the wall is always going to be bloodied and bashed, right? Like, I knew, and I loved these kids, and I wanted them to be. But look, they were attacking me, and they were not saying nice things about me. Some of these bands that I really helped out.
Like Jason said, the basement and Mojo's were the proving ground, and then when you turned 21, you could go play the bigger venues, and if you had a big enough scene,
These guys right here. Sorry.
if you had a big enough following, you could even some bands even toured, around the Western U.S.
And you would get paid to go play at a bar now because we weren't selling alcohol or any drinks. We were selling the experience, right?
Yeah.
So we weren't selling coffee. We weren't selling drinks. We weren't selling concessions. We were selling a concert. You came to a concert and you went
y'all
home.
should have been selling concessions.
We tried we didn't make enough money. Like, it was such a hassle to pay someone and then to clean up all the messes and stuff. So we were just like, no, we're done.
Yeah.
So we focused on some businesses have like a shotgun approach where they're like, we're going to do as much as we can and try to make money. Ours was more of a sniper rifle. We were going to do one thing and do it perfect.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
So how do you fix this? How do you bring it back? And how do you be successful?
Look at these guys.
Like, I've been spending this whole time wondering. You were talking about Ted. Is it Ted from the Junction?
Ted started at the Junction, yeah.
Yeah. Ted says Ogden can't handle it because we basically can't bring the people up from Salt Lake, and the people from Ogden aren't.
I mean,
showing up
I
enough.
think I proved him wrong.
Yeah, I think so
Personally,
too.
I think with the success, when you're looking at a venue in Ogden that was averaging in 2011 250 people.
Keep in mind the recession's on, right?
Yeah.
People
Think
are
about
poor.
the time between 2009 and 2012. I mean, ultimately the recession caught up to me. There was too many things going on in town. My rent was too high, but in 2011 we were succeeding,
right,
and so we proved him wrong.
So I mean, you did. I can't say you didn't, but at the same time, it's like it can happen if somebody puts all this effort into training those people into somehow working together to kind of build it up. It's like, yeah, it's possible, but with the amount of works it takes, is it feasible? Is it the kind of thing that's ever going to be sustainable? Or is it always going to be one guy comes in and does it for a few years, then somebody else comes and picks up the torch?
I think
it can be sustainable because, like, what Jason just explained to you all here is that, like, there was an ecosystem. There was an ecosystem where this
but
could
he
happen.
had to build it.
Yeah, of course, you have to build an ecosystem. Like, it doesn't just happen by itself. Like, but once it's built, it will run. The problem that Jason ran into was that, rents going up, things like that, and the same thing happened to Mojo's, right? Like, Ron had to get out of there because he wasn't able to cover the rent anymore. The guy tripled his rent.
And honestly, moving out of downtown had a big negative effect on there, and nobody is getting a music venue downtown these days.
No.
Is
it okay?
Because,
So,
like, the one place I had hope for maybe there being a downtown venue is where, like, UTOG is.
You know what?
And now that ain't going to happen.
Somebody should take those old rundown buildings like 24th and Wall, or there's buildings that have been empty for 20 years or more,
or
30
more,
years.
like my entire life.
So here's okay. So we'll get into logistics here
like
now
those old
because
barns
you start talking about code enforcement, and then that gets
historic
expensive,
buildings.
right? So code enforcement and having to build, like, do the remodeling to get it to a place where you can qualify to get that many people in there, right? So you've got like international building codes and all these things that have to be done to determine what your occupancy is, and then how much money it's going to take to get it to there. You've also got zoning issues there are some zones that just don't allow it. So like when I moved from downtown onto where it was a permitted zone, I had to go to the planning commission and get a conditional use for it in when I was on Wall Avenue, right? So there's a lot of political things that are working as well. So to answer the question, how do you get it back? Because right now we're in the same situation we were in from 2003 to 2005.
Yeah,
right? Okay?
There's nothing.
Now here's something that's interesting.
But it's been a longer drought.
Yeah. It's been a longer drought,
been
but
4
there's
years.
been people that have been doing. You remember when I was running those illicit shows out of the basement?
Mm-hmm.
There's been people that have been keeping it alive and keeping it on life support. right? Like I was doing back in 03 to 05 before Ron opened up the Mojos. There's been people that have been doing that. They've been people doing house shows, been people doing shows at bars with bands that could potentially rebuild a scene. There are people behind the scenes that are doing what's necessary to get it to where I think it could survive. And there's a group of them right now that are putting a venue together that I've been watching anxiously because I think they're onto something. And these are people who came from the Mojo scene, who understood. They're people who came to the basement and played at the basement. These are people who have seen what worked at Mojo's, and they want to do it right. And so you're going to see here in the next few months, you're going to see a venue open up called the Co-op. So keep an eye out for that. The Co-op will open, and it will. I have confidence that these people are going to be successful in what they're doing. Okay.
Co-op?
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
the Co-op live music venue.
So
Oh, check
they're
that
gonna.
out.
This is going to be.
What?
They've already. They did a Kickstarter. They raised over $5,000 to buy some sound equipment. I think these guys are onto something, and I think they're going to do something special. And I think they're going to basically revive the old Mojos feel. My personal feeling is in order to be as successful as possible for every Mojos, you have to have a basement. Okay. If Mojo's really started to succeed and do really well and get a lot of shows when there was someone there that was pushing the bands, right? And look, if I had to play the villain, I'm happy to play it. If I had to be the guy that they didn't trust and they didn't like, that sacrifice, I'll fall on that sword to build the scene any day. Okay, because for every band that didn't trust me, there's bands that loved working with me and were proud to be a part of that scene. Okay, I think about that first Battle of the Bands we had. That first Tournament of Champions, when we had a band called Matt Ben Jackson,
Yeah, I know, man.
who changed their name to the Old World.
Old
Those
World,
guys
yeah.
were phenomenal. They won the first one.
Yeah, those
And
guys
what
were
I did,
phenomenal.
what I did with that first one, and what I did with the second one, I said, any money that is brought in that night, we're going to split it among the 4 bands that are playing in that finals. All 4 bands are going to go home with something. Okay, there was Matt Ben Jackson. They took first place.
They were good.
We sold over 500 tickets. We split $2,500 between all the bands that night. They walked home with $1,500 in their pocket.
Nice.
Okay, local bands at the time. You got to think, if you go, I was paying touring bands $500 to $1,000. This local band that won this tournament, this Battle of the Bands, made $1,500 in one night. Like, so when people say, "Oh, you don't pay the band," it's like, dude, like if they're good enough, they're getting paid. Fire in the Skies, when they would help me set up these big shows, they were making thousands of dollars off of these shows, right? Because they would promote them and they would get out and they were the big headliner. And the bands were getting paid. It was those little bands that were only bringing 30 to 40 kids that were like, we should get paid too. It's like, you need to work harder, right? If you're bringing in 100 people, yeah, I'll kick you $100. That's great. But when we're charging $5 at the door and I got $4,000 a month in overhead, I can't pay you for bringing 40 kids, right? Go throw a house show, charge $5 and keep it all.
Huh.
Go rent a sound system, right? Go rent a sound system and do it yourself. Like, I got bills to pay and I'm sorry. So there was like Matt Ben Jackson that night, a band called Sleep Radio that was amazing. They were like gym class heroes kind of style. You had a band called Sweatband and a band called Adalast, and every one of them walked home with a couple $100. Like, not a bad take for one night for Battle of the Bands. And so
Yeah.
so we had, and so those bands were then now the leaders of the scene, and they were headlining shows and bands were playing with them. And so we built it well. I think the Co-op is going to open the door for someone else to come through and try to take it to that next level again. And can we get it back to there? I don't know. I hope so. But I think
you could.
music's changed. I think people have changed, but I also think that we talked earlier about millennials and Generation Z, where they need to take up arms and fight. They also need to express themselves creatively. And with all the funding cuts in schools to art and creative programs, things like the Co-op, Mojos, the Basement, the Junction, kids turn to that and they need it, and they'll always need it. And the more population growth we have in this valley and in this county, I think you're going to see success come in the local music scene for these junior high and high school age kids. They need a place to go.
Huh.
So I think we'll see it go.
Well, thank you for that, Jason.
You're very welcome.